Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar. I'm Laura Milojevic, the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Simplify Solutions. Today, we're excited to have our Client Partner and Solutions Director, Dan Skinsdale, discussing and demoing Control the Planning Process with SAP Analytics Cloud Calendar. When the webinar concludes, a short survey is going to appear. If you could please fill that out, we would really appreciate it. And please feel free to reach out to Dan or myself after the webinar with any questions. If you have any questions while we're going through, just raise your hand or put it in the questions box and we can answer it as we go along. So now I will hand it over to Dan. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Good morning, everybody. As Lauren said, we are looking at webinar today of controlling the planning process with SAP Analytics Cloud. And just a quick introduction of myself for those that don't know me. Dan Skinsdale, like Lauren said, Solutions Director, Client Partner at Simplify. I've been with Simplify for about 4 years, and prior to that, spent about 25 plus years in corporate finance, a lot of FP&A experience. So just as a heads up to everyone, will receive a copy of this deck, so my contact information will be available to you, etc. So quick agenda for the webinar. We'll take a look at just a quick intro of Simplify for those that don't know us or aren't too familiar with us. We'll look at the fundamentals of the calendar function in Analytics Cloud. Look at a couple use cases and how you'd want to be able, could use the calendar in your processes, and definitely go through a hands-on live demo of building out some of those use cases. So with that, let's just take a quick intro of Simplify. And we are a firm that partners, and we're focused on process design, business content, and automation. We do a lot of focus on analytics and planning and consolidations, working, excuse me, primarily with SAP Analytics Cloud, group reporting, even data warehouse cloud, etc., as well as BPC. We are staffed with a lot of folks like myself with a lot of business experience, but also with additional credentials such as CPAs, MBAs, but also very skilled from a technical standpoint, so we can bring those two aspects together. We also deliver to our customers a lot of prepackaged content, and we have content in the areas of planning such as sales and revenue, product costing, P&L forecasting, etc., HR planning, CapEx planning. As you can see on the screen there, a lot of prepackaged content that we can then tailor to your specific business needs. So that's just a quick overview of Simplify for those that were not too familiar with Simplify. But here is our kind of approach. We work in these various areas of the general business. In some of the client partners we have are a little more expertise in some of these areas. But anyway, those are kind of the main areas that we work in there. So I'd be happy to discuss any of those with you. So jumping right into SAC Calendar, SAP Analytics Cloud Calendar. The one thing I want to stress here is I'm going to show some definitions, some examples, and things like that. I'm going to run through the kind of the PowerPoint slides here rather quickly. Again, like Lauren said, feel free to ask questions along the way, but chances are, as I go through the points and so forth, that some of your questions will be answered as we go through the demo as well. Because I think the demo is going to be more important for you, and since you're going to get the deck anyway, the information here will be good reference material for you. So with that, let's head into some of the calendar fundamentals here. So what are the purpose and benefits of this? If you could, think of the calendar in another word, just think of the word workflow management. And as we do that, we can assign various things like tasks and processes and so forth. You can have owners of those processes. You can assign tasks to, assignees, and then even have reviewers set up to review the work of the tasks that have been completed by the assignees. So you can see that the workflow there is starting to emerge with some of the roles that are available within the calendar process. This calendar process too integrates seamlessly with the stories, and you'll see that quite apparent as we get into the demo. It's going to be a way that you can basically just automate a lot of the planning process mechanics. I work with clients today, and some of you may be on the webinar here. Some of you already use the calendar function for some of the basic things in your planning process, such as scheduling data actions, for example, and other maybe data locking down a forecast, locking down a planning process. So some of those manual tasks can be automated by the admin in the process or of the process. And lastly, too, the calendar function can also, when you set this up, track the progress of your planning process. So as assignees and reviewers complete their tasks, you'll see that there are progress bars and so forth that will tell you exactly where you are in the process. So again, I touched a little bit on this already, but we can create tasks and assign them specifically to users. We can set due dates, and as I said, monitor the process. And then even as we create tasks, we can also turn them into processes in and of themselves and then add more tasks below that. And think of a process, as is noted here, just as an aggregation of all the events that are below it, kind of children of that process. Again, different tasks, review steps, etc. And then in the calendaring function too, scheduling those automatic tasks that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so what are the types of events that we can add to a calendar? Again, talked a little bit about some of these. I think we know what a process is. It's going to be kind of an all-encompassing umbrella, if you will, of a given process. And you can even nest processes within a process, kind of a sub-process, if you will. And then within those processes, you would have some different tasks called composite, general, review, or input tasks. And in the deck that you are going to get here in the appendix, there is a slide and a couple more slides that give some very detailed definitions of what these are, but you will see them in action, so you'll have an idea of what they are and what they're doing. But the definitions will definitely be there for you in the deck, so I'm not going to go into those in too much detail. I think it's going to be more valuable if we just see them in action. So those tasks at the very top, those are going to be primarily used by the planning process and by the end user, okay? Where those that are below here, probably more so by the system admin as they schedule data locking tasks, data action tasks, even multi-action tasks, etc. Okay, and these processes and tasks, they can be created individually, but there is a very good wizard that is contained within the calendar function that can build a lot of this for you, and we will definitely go through that and give you a good example, a couple of good examples of what that is. Okay, so our first look at the calendar in SAC, for those who have not seen it before, again, we are going to go through this in detail live, so this is just here for your information, but you can see there are calendar workspaces that contain well, different views, calendar views, Gantt views, or list views, and all those are sitting off to the right. So you have, some good ways of looking at your process, where you are in the process, uh, especially from a Gantt perspective. That's a good timeline visual there for your process. And as you can see in the lower right in the listing, you can see an example of some of the progress bars off to the right as well. So it's easy to flip back and forth between these. And then you even have a further detail breakdown where you can look at each of these views by day, by week, by month. So quite versatile there. So those are some basics of the calendar fundamentals. So what are some of the use cases? What would we really use this for in a practical standpoint? So if I look at a couple of scenarios, if we just think of our planning processes from a practical annual perspective in the budget, or maybe quarterly forecasts, et cetera, generally speaking, you're going to get a process dictated to you if you're in a business unit, for example, of a top-down process. The corporate function, corporate FP&A is going to say, hey, this is the process we have. These are some input templates that we have for you. We need to have some data submitted to us by this date in this format at this level of detail, for example, okay? But as you know, a lot of businesses, they're diversified enough where each of those businesses or business units, and in this case here, even from a regional perspective, North America, Latin America, et cetera, their makeup and structure within those regions can be different enough where they're not necessarily conducive to the corporate-driven top-down process. So what the calendar will allow us to do is, we can create a process from a corporate perspective that takes it down to a certain level, just where the gray line is there. And then beyond that, someone who's been assigned, in North America for the region manager for Canada and US, they can then take the task that they were assigned and turn it into a process, and then they can make assignments to others within his or her organization, and delegate those specific processes. So that's what I look at and refer to as a top-down, both a top-down and bottom-up planning process. So again, kind of dictated from the top down to a certain level, but then when you get into the details, out into the field, out into the business units or the regions, that there's flexibility built into the tool that will allow those areas to kind of model their own process at that point. And again, so long as they meet the corporate requirements at the end of the day. Okay, so that's one example that we'll take a quick look at. Another would be is, what about multiple level review scenarios? Okay, so we could kind of keep in mind the previous slide as well, because these can kind of work together. But what we can have is, once we assign tasks to users, we can also add review rounds to it. And you'll see how this is set up. It's done very easily. But looking at the flow chart to the right, at the bottom, you can see, a task is opened, the assignee is going to perform the task, and you can set up the calendar where it automatically notifies the reviewer that, hey, the assignee finished this task, so I need to go review it. They can then approve or reject it. If they reject it, it automatically goes back to the assignee, who then has to, address any issues, etc. It would then send it back for review again once they were completed. And then once it approves, it moves on to the next review. So if we think about this from an organizational standpoint, maybe there's a FP&A analyst in one of the regions that opens the task originally. In the round one review is maybe that regional director that is responsible for submitting that North America budget. Then once that is completed, maybe that round 2 review is the corporate FP&A director, or maybe even the CFO. So you can bake in several rounds of reviews in the calendar process as well. And it facilitates all the workflow, not only within SAC with alerts and so forth within the tool, but all of these users, since their user ID is connected to their email address, they will also get email notifications directly to their inbox with links directly to any stories or any other content that they need to be made aware of so that they can review. So quite handy from that perspective. So okay, so I did say I was going to run through that pretty quickly. And again, you can use this as reference in the future, as well as referring to the appendix that has some much more detailed definitions on some of the items that I addressed. So with that, I'm just going to jump right into a use case demo. Even before that, just give us a quick overview of the calendar functionality itself, just from a live perspective. So let me get rid of some of this here. Okay. So what we have here, I do have 2 different browsers open. And the reason for that is, and you'll see that as we go through the demo here, is I have 2 different user IDs active, mine and a training ID here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform some items on one side. You're going to see the results on the other, and vice versa. So we'll see that as we go through the demo. But first, I want to just kind of give you a little tour here. I have a pre-built forecast process already built so that you can kind of get an idea of where things are here. I'm just going to refresh the page just to make sure everything is going here. All right, so generally when you'd come in here, you would see a process, which is indicated by these little side carrots there, or the arrows. As I mentioned earlier, you have your different workspaces where you can see things in a calendar view, a Gantt view. So if we click on the calendar here, it's by week. Here's, look at it by day, some of the different tasks, or even by month. So you have it that way, but we can look at it. The Gantt chart here it is closed, but we can open it up and see it in a little more detail. We'll send it to week, and then we can see some more detail there. I'll come back to this in a second, but there are some general items up here too that we can do. If we click on the little plus sign here, this is where we're going to be able to add specific tasks, processes, and so forth. Here's the events wizard that we will take a look at shortly. You can also copy existing tasks so that you can, instead of recreating the wheel, if you just have something similar, maybe there's a different selection within it for a filter or something like that, you might as well just copy something that already exists. If you need to delete something, here's your trash can. We also have the button here where you can convert a task to a process, okay? Then we have some ways of sorting things, having different views, and so forth. You can also, as a user, if you have a large process that's in place, maybe you want to filter it on your particular roles where you are the assigner or you are just a viewer or even the owner. You can look at things in their various statuses and it will just show you those that have those particular statuses, etc. So quite versatile and flexible as far as what you can and can't do. Even looking at the types of actions that are here. So if you needed to see all of the input tasks that are set for you, you could do those here and maybe then look at those in list view. It might be more easy for you to do that. So The only other thing on here, and by the way, to access the calendar, I know I had this open on the screen, but if you go to your Analytics Cloud menu, you should see it at the very bottom of your listing of menu items. It's just called Calendar, and it will take you directly to this screen right here, okay? So what we have here is a forecast process. This is the parent process, and you can tell by these little arrows here that is the icon for process. You can see that there are sub-processes here. There's a sales forecast process, an expense process, and then some other stuff that's going on down here, okay? So let's take a look at the overall process. So I just highlighted the top line, and I'm gonna look at the details here. So let's just navigate down this column here. So this is going to give us the details about the forecast process. So we can see the progress that's been made, which is nothing to this point. Who the assignee is, how many child events are here, if there's been any work files that have been attached. If you have any particular description, which the users or assignees would see when they open up their items. The overall process can have a due date. There's a start date right there. You can also add particular reminders here. So maybe when we're halfway through the process, it's going to send a reminder to all assignees, all reviewers to say, hey, we're halfway through the process. You need to go out there and check, if you have any open tasks, etc. You can just send immediate reminders, or you can set those, like I said, 50% through the process or any other percentage of the process that you desire. We can automatically cancel the process at the specified due date, which would then shut the process down. Here, we'll get into the context here, but this is where we can, I'll hold off on that. We'll get into that as we get into some of the other tasks. But here's where you're going to be able to assign owners, maybe add additional owners, assignees, other viewers of the process. And then here it's also going to display your child events. And you can also attach additional information such as an Excel file, a PDF or something, even a website, things that are going to be pertinent to the process, okay? So with that, that's the umbrella process. So let's just take a quick dive into one of the tasks. This is going to be a composite task. So this is going to be something that's been assigned to a user. And in that, when I created this, I created an overall note that says, hey, we need at least 4% year-over-year growth for this sales forecast, okay? So as we go through this, they will see that, and I'll show you where they will see that in a moment. I also attached to here when I created this is a work file. In this case, it's called a forecast demo is the name of the story in Analytics Cloud. And when the user clicks on this, they are going to go directly to that story, and it's going to take them, if I scroll down and jump onto that context that was blank in the overall process, this context here is set up directly for the model, the date, the currency, the version, and the company code that they need to work on for this particular task. So no matter what that story is filtered to, by default, when they open it up through here, this is what it will be filtered to. Okay, so that gives them direct access to what they need to work on. Okay. Again, for this specific task, we can have different owners, assignees, reviewers in this case as well. Also assigning, as I did here, added a reference file for production growth outlook or product growth outlook, etc. Okay, so these are all going to be the same. They're just for different regions, etc. There's also an expense forecast here that has similar information, a similar breakdown. And then in addition to that, we have some other tasks like once the sales forecast is done, we want to just take and push this automatically to our consolidation model, for example. Maybe we're doing the revenue or the sales forecast in a different model. Once this is complete, I don't have a specific data action called out here, but we can choose a data action that will do this copy for us. And we can trigger that automatically so that when the last process is complete, or this process here is complete, that this will run automatically and just, we can have it lock automatically, then we can have this data copied over to our consolidation and call this process, the sales process, complete, okay? We have something similarly set up for the expense process, and you can see here some data locking steps as well, all indicated by their little kind of obvious icons with padlock, kind of a list here, a little clipboard with a check mark for the different tasks that users need to work on, okay? So with that, let's take a quick look at what the user is going to see, okay? So over here on the screen on the right is one of the users, and this is their home screen, and whether the system admin or the user specified this, you can put a calendar highlight widget or tile on your home screen that will alert you to any task that you have assigned to you, anything that's coming up, like this one here. There's an old process here that's in our system, so it even shows the overdue tasks, but here is one right here. It's actually this task right here. So if me as this user, this assignee, I see this task here, I'm just going to go ahead and click on it, and you'll see it's going to be a very familiar screen. Nope, this one's taking me directly to the story. But one assumption here with this review of the calendar function is that you do have some experience in Analytics Cloud and with stories. So assuming you do, you are going to recognize that you normally don't see this bar right here. And this is here strictly from the calendar perspective. This is added here from that calendar task. And this is going to display when the user clicks on that link. So this is going to take them to the story that they needed to use in the input story to actually enter their data, okay? So one thing they have, if we hover over this, you can see it's the name of the task. We know it's in process, gives you the start date, due date. It's going to spell out the context here. So you can see if I hover over that, you're going to see the context, meaning what version it is, what currency it is, all the different IDs of the different dimensions that I chose to be specific for this process. And also here's that description from the overall process, or this overall sales process, that I said, hey everyone, we need to get 4% year-over-year growth. So I know that that's what I need to shoot for, okay? So what they can do, and I will just do this quickly, let's just say I'm an agreeable person and I know the team can do that, so I'm gonna say, let's just put in plus 4%. It's increased that. I'm gonna increase my volumes too by 4%. Okay, so I'm satisfied with what I've done here now. So I'm going to say my task is done and I'm going to submit it, okay? So I purposefully did not publish that data because I wanted to show you that the user is going to be warned that, hey, I know you're going to try to complete this task, but you need to publish it also. So that's what this is going to do. It's going to just show you what's going on there. It's going to give you your context here. And then you can just say publish and submit. Okay, you can see that the submit button went away. And if we click on the details here, you can see we're going to see that same screen that we see on the left here, but this is from the user's perspective. This is one thing too that we could have referenced. If we just click on this link here, we can see that it's going to download the file and we just have instant access to, maybe it's a source file that has some statistical information that we need to review. Okay, so everything is going to be there right at the user's fingertips that they need to perform their process. So what does this look like from, we'll just call it the process monitor's perspective? So let's just go ahead and refresh this page here. Again, just kind of expand this out a little bit. Okay, so you can see this process has been completed, and however, it says it's only 75% complete. And why is that? Well, let's take a look at this here. And you will see that, well, I'm going to go to one that is not complete because I think it's going to show you. Yes, here we go. When we set this up, since we have an assignee and a reviewer in this task, it means there's really multiple steps within this task. So what's happened so far is that we've completed the first task, and now the reviewer is up to bat now to finish the process. But when we set this up, we can allot, in this start and end date, we can allot so much time to the assignee and so much time to the reviewer. By default, it's going to be 75% to the assignee, but you can move this, and you can see as I move it, hopefully it's big enough for you to see, but you can see where the start or the due date and time changes here. Okay, so this was set to 75% by default. I'm just going to revert that so we don't lose that. But that's why when the assignees finish their process, that's why it went to 75%. Okay, so what this means now is that the reviewer has some work to do. So one thing that I'm going to look at is I'm going to quickly pull up my email because I should have received, there we go. Okay, so I am the reviewer of the work that took place over here. This is the email that I received in my inbox the moment that this was submitted, that me as the reviewer, I need to go complete my portion of that task, okay? So what I can do is I can go and just click on that link with the open task. It's going to take me directly to this task, and it's not going to take me to the story, but I know the story is right here, so I'll just go ahead and click on that. And when I do that, you can see there's a difference up here. The assignee before had a submit button here where I have an approve and reject button. Okay, I see the same exact information. I just go here. This is the data over here that was increased by 4%. So this is what published. I see the same exact data over here. So this is a simple report. Maybe you have something out there that, has some comparisons to actuals or maybe some thresholds and so forth that are in there. But for example's sake, this is pretty straightforward and simple. So me as a reviewer, I just know that, yes, this meets our threshold, so I can just approve this. I could reject it if I wanted to, and what that would do is the assignee over here would get a notification both in their email inbox as well as up here in their notification center, okay? It would also flash on their screen at the bottom here, okay? So I'm just gonna go ahead and, let's just go ahead and approve that. Okay, and you can see right here that the user was notified with a kind of a flash down at the bottom there that, hey, their process was approved. So I guess they can go home now. But the reviewer here probably has more work to do. So what we can do is let's go back here and refresh this, and you will see that this task is now 100% complete. So it's accomplished here, and go in there. Overall, it's 25% complete because there's 4 steps in here, and one of them is 100%. So obviously you can see the math is working there. So this is going to be a good way for the process monitor or the process owner overall to see what the status is of all the steps within the process. Okay. All right. So this is, I just wanted to walk you through quickly on something that was already set up. So you may be thinking, well, this kind of looks a little cumbersome to set up. I have to set up all these individual steps, put in all these due dates, assign it to people, etc. That can be quite time consuming. And I would agree with you, it could be, but with the wizard here, there are ways that we can drastically and dramatically speed that process up. So one way to do this, and well, I'll show you how we get to that point after we actually do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and build a plan process, a budget process, similar to the forecast process here, and you'll see how quickly it will go. So we're going to build something new, and you can have, you know, multiple processes here. You could actually be part of several different processes here. So this just happens to be one, and we're going to add another. So I'll just go ahead and leave that there. So I'm going to say, go to General, say Generate Events Wizard. So now we're taken to this screen here, where do we want to create a new process with child events, or child events of for an existing process, etc. We're just going to create something new, and let's give it a process name. We're going to call it, say, Budget 2022. Okay, and we are going to start that. We'll just keep it at noon. That's fine. There's our due date. We're going to keep it open for an hour. That sounds good. We can say activate events at the start date automatically. What this means is that soon as the clock ticks to this moment in time, the process will be automatically turned on. Okay. Now here is where we can select some work files. In this case, I'm just going to go and grab the same file. I just know where it's at. This forecast demo. It's the same file that we have over here, same story. Okay, so it's walked me through the first step, and now I can quickly click on step 2. Well, what's my context? What is, we'll call it the data region or context. What are we going to be working with here? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to select a model. I just know I have one called calendar out there. We'll just grab that. Now we have something called our driving dimension. So what is that? This is really the thing that's going to be the main backbone of what we are creating the events off of. What dimension is driving this process? And you think of that mainly from an organizational perspective, just as I'm generalizing, you know, so this could be a company code, this could be a set of profit centers, or maybe even countries, you know, if we're looking at regions. Okay, but in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and use company code, and I am going to select the members. So if I look at these here, these are, yes, they're company codes, but they are broken into regions. So I am going to go ahead and just select these right here. Okay, we can select everything, or you can just select specific ones that you want. So I'm just going to select those 4, click OK. And now, in addition to kind of finish off the context, what we will do is take a look at adding some filter, adding some more specific context. So what we want to do is we want to look at our version. what are we actually working on? We're going to work on the annual budget, okay? We are also going to work on the annual budget for 2022. And let's see, we are also going to make sure that they're only entering data in local currency. Let's do that. Okay, so we've set our context to having the company code be our driver and then selecting some specific context there. So now let's go ahead and assign people. So as you're looking at the previous list, this is the part where you're thinking, gosh, this is going to be quite cumbersome to add all of those assignees and reviewers, etc. Well, I'll show you how quickly we can do this, and then I'll show you kind of behind the scenes how it takes place. So I'm going to go ahead and say assignees. And what this is doing now is looking at properties from our driving dimension. So I have a couple properties out there, one called assignee, one called reviewer, one called reviewer 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and select assignee here. And then for reviewer, I'm just going to have a single level review at this point, and we'll just leave it at that. But you can add additional levels of reviews here. So, you know, the review process can get quite complex if it needs to, depending upon your situation, okay? So next step would be, okay, how do we want to communicate to our assignees and the teams that will be using this? Here we have automatically giving it the name, and then we can add to that the member description or ID of the driving dimension item that we're looking at. So if you look over here to the right on what the user saw, the same setup was done for the forecast process so that you can see, it says annual, well, this one said annual budget input, but it had company Acme North America. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to see here. It actually, this is what it's going to show right here. Okay, so I can also send the message here that says we're being very aggressive, so need to have 8% year-over-year growth. Okay, so this would be that message that they would see over here from that drop down. So we can go just to our next step. And this is kind of the preview of what we're going to see when we generate this task or this process. So you can see magically, if you will, that the tasks have been created based on those selections I made in the company. But if you look at assignee and reviewer, there have been users already assigned to this. So how does that happen? Well, I'm just going to go ahead and generate that. And while that is generating, which does not take long, I'm going to jump over here to the model itself. And this is our company code dimension, okay? So what you would do here, these are the company codes, just the IDs, you don't see the names there. And see, we get the indicator down here that all the tasks and processes have been generated successfully. So what I've done here is I've created a property for assignee, reviewer, reviewer 2, and I just used 2 different user IDs here just for simplicity, but obviously the organization, depending upon the organization, you could have something quite complex here. These are the actual user IDs within the system. So you would put these in here. So when I chose, say this rolls up to a single region, for example, the assignee, when I chose the assignee property, whoever is sitting in this field, they are automatically going to be assigned that task. And likewise down here and down here and down here, okay? You do not have to, this is the only place you would have to maintain this so that you could repeatedly set up this process and know that you're going to get the latest and greatest assignees there. So you could also say, well, how am I going to get these in here? Well, again, depending upon the size of your organization, the complexity of your processes, you could, maintain those here manually. You could also maintain those, offline, if you will, and we could import these to update these properties. Maybe they're maintained offline in a spreadsheet somewhere. Maybe that's just easier for everyone to do. Then you can update these, before your forecast, before you generate that process, and then it will assign everything automatically for you. Okay. So depending upon what your driving dimension is, you may have different dimensions that are driving dimensions for different types of forecasts. Maybe there's one for product, one for country. You could set up something like this independently within those dimensions so that when they are used in a process, you will have this same type of information. Okay. All right, so jumping back over to the calendar screen, we now see that we do have a budget process here, and we have a few steps. I'm not going to create any more complexity here with this, other than the fact that I want to show you how someone can take what we will call here as the corporate driven process. That corporate says, okay, North America, Asia Pacific, LATAM, and EMEA, you need to get your budget completed at this level, submit it in the format that we need it by this due date, okay? However, let's say, based on the example I was sharing earlier in the PowerPoint deck, what if the director here wants to assign things differently, wants to delegate this down throughout his or her organization? What they can do then, and I mentioned this earlier, is they can go and come in here because they've been assigned this task. They can actually come in here and convert this to a process, okay? Just by clicking on this button, this is taking that task, which was Acme North America, converting it to a process and generating a general and a review task automatically. Okay, so let's just do that. And now you see that is here. So that's all well and good, you say, but that person is probably still assigned to it, etc. Well, they can come in here, they can add, and I'm limited here as far as what we can see because just with the IDs in the system, you can invite or add people to the process, okay? You can delegate this out to others within your group. And likewise, maybe add yourself, again, assuming you are the director here, you could add yourself as the reviewer, not the reviewer, the viewer at this point. And we can add a review step to this manually as well. So you can kind of see what's happening at this point is that to describe a top-down, bottom-up process. And yes, I'm doing a very simple example here, but what this is going to show us is that we have a corporate dictated process. We can then, maybe you'll have a power user in each of these areas that maybe monitors their processes. Maybe there's even a different SAC model that North America has because their business is different enough that they roll up their data from a detail level differently, but ultimately get it to the level of detail that they need to submit it to the corporate process. That process maybe is a template that's already sitting out here, and then they can just incorporate that process into here. Okay, very flexible in how you can build out these processes. Okay, so with that, that is pretty much what we had to share for this. Again, if we take a look at, we go back to just based on what we set up here on this home screen. Okay, show 9 more. Okay, hasn't come out as being assigned there yet. But again, setting up this new process, those assignees would come up here as well. And we go over to their calendar. You can see there's the sales process. And the reason why they're not showing up yet is really because this is not active yet. So let me do that. Let's just activate this. I did set it up to activate automatically, which won't be for another 8 minutes, but we can activate it manually. And it will also notify everyone and activate all of the child events too. So let's just go ahead and do that. Okay, status updated, it's doing an hour. Go ahead and refresh this. You can now see that since that process has been activated, just with that one click, the assignee here has all of their tasks right before them, right here. Okay, so again, everything works very real time. As one task is complete, if you have set dependencies here, which is what we have here in this this review that we've set up, this sub process. If we were to go and approve this process, which we can do, let's just go ahead and nope, that one's not. Might be because it's not 12 yet. But what we would do as soon as that process is complete, excuse me, this one will kick in as active automatically. You can see this is open, but this one is on hold, and this one will be on a on hold status until this one is complete. Okay, so I know I can do this by changing this to say 11:54. We'll update that. This should take us out there. Not yet. So, but when that is completed, this person here, the reviewer, will get a notification automatically, and it will then, it's actually, this is what I needed to update, but they will get a notification saying that their process is ready to review, and they can go directly to that story, check out the data, do the same approve or reject that they did before. So, but again, they would not get notified, or their task would not even be enabled until the previous task that they have a dependency set up on, which is right here, because we can start that based on another process or dependency. And if we choose dependency, we choose what the other task was. And it just allows the workflow to go from there. So with that, let me jump back over to the PowerPoint. And I just wanted to briefly just show you what's in the appendix. You're not going to be able to read it. Well, maybe you are, could be big enough on the screen, but here I give some very distinct definitions as far as what the assignee, what the different calendar roles are, the different assignees, reviewers, etc., and what they would do. Whoops. There is also a link at the bottom. It may come out in the PDF, the actual link may be clickable, it should be, but if not, if you just go to your SAC help and type in understand the workflow and calendar roles, it will take you to a help section that contains these tables, but I thought these were very helpful for you guys to have at your disposal. Again, here looking at the event type details, you know, all the way from the general tasks down to the process and even the publication and input tasks. So again, very helpful information. So with that, I do want to say thank you. Thank you for your time today. If there are any questions, we could take those now. I do see a few here. is it possible to dummy-proof the planning process with the calendar? In other words, a forced workflow. Yes, I used to use the term dummy-proof, but I use the word goof-proof now. But I do like the term though, but I clearly understand what you're saying. As far as dummy-proofing it goes, I guess I don't fully understand your question, but you can set this up from even a security standpoint and so forth, where people are only going to have access to what they need when they need it. You can control things with data locking. So as soon as their task is complete, you could add a data locking task that is dependent on them completing their task. So once they submit something, they cannot go back and change it. So there are different things that we can look at to mitigate some of the silly things that some people might do. Let's put it that way. Here we go. Once published, if we reject, will the data get reverted? No, it will not. The data is published. When the data is published, it is published. But the thing is, there are different things that can be done. You can instruct users in your process to, save off private versions if they would like, if they need to reinstate something. But what you could do is maybe the reason for rejecting your data is that, maybe their sales growth is not enough, or maybe they missed a line of expenses. They're just likely going to have to add data to it or subtract data from it, or just make a change to the existing data that you as the reviewer just reviewed. So I really don't see that as an issue from a process standpoint, but one safeguard is for the user to save off a private version. Yes, the recording will be sent out. There will be a link to the recording. It will come out in the next couple of days with a link to the recording on our Simplify YouTube site or YouTube channel. Can this be compared to business process flow in BPC? Yes, it can be. There are some similarities there, but for those of you that have used BPC, and I've worked with BPC and I have put together some business process flows within BPC, the Analytics Cloud calendar work function for workflow is much more powerful than the BPC process flow, the business process flow in BPC. So, but yes, definitely some similarities there. And we are at the top of the hour. I'm just seeing if there's anything else it's worth noting. Can the reviewer edit the data or just the assignee? The reviewer, you can set it up where the reviewer can edit the data, yes. Again, that depends on your process. We did not get into that specific, but yes, that capability is there. Someone's asking if we can add viewers kind of dynamically to the process, meaning, okay, if there is maybe a threshold, I think the example here is if it's greater than $100,000, the thing that we're looking at, can we add reviewer A or reviewer B? That I would say no, that function is not there for that. However, you can add multiple reviewers to a step. So you could have the reviewer that has the higher authority be the one that's tasked with actually submitting the review. So that would be a manual process for sure, but one that is not at this point capable of adding those reviewers dynamically. So that is all the questions that I see that have come through. So like I said, you will be getting a link to this recording as well as a copy of this PowerPoint deck. So again, I appreciate your time. And if you have any questions further that you want to reach out directly to me, my contact information will be on that deck and be happy to speak with you. So have a great day. Thank you.